I was bullied.
Now was a bully. Brian's stutter was one of the many things that I bullied him over.
I always believed that I didn't have anyone to talk to or share what I was going through.
It's amazing how a sincere, simple apology can change everything.
Welcome to Bullied Dialogues. I'm Clinton Fain.
And I'm Brian Schimmel. In our Bullied Dialogues, as you have gathered in the past couple of episodes, we are talking about people who bully and people who are bullied, and the various ramifications and the dynamics around this topic. But have you ever considered that every single one of us is bullied every single day? You know that, Clinton? We are.
I do.
By what?
By algorithms.
Correct.
And not only algorithms, although algorithms, we could probably have this whole conversation just about algorithms, but I think it's a combination of algorithms and social media policies of corporations, which go hand in hand because they're the ones who create the algorithms that are doing the bullying.
Correct.
And, people don't... It's interesting since we've started doing this, how people don't oftentimes frame things from a bullying perspective. But then when it is framed that way, it's almost, well, how could it not have been framed that way before?
Correct.
And I think this is one of those instances because, we are...
I think to that point, it's because there is such a conditioned definition of what bullying is. And one of the things we aim to and we strive to achieve in these dialogues is just how many other acts and how much other behavior and how is actually can be framed as bullying.
Yeah. And let's look at how does an algorithm bully? So let's give some examples of that.
Okay.
Your Instagram feed.
Yeah, I was searching for something the other day, as we all do, and within seconds and for the next days and weeks, I was bombarded with ads about the one particular subject. Now, it may be seen as, that's how the algorithm works, and whatever you search for, it's going to give you more information on. But it is bullying because what if you were just searching on a one time and you didn't want to be inundated and bombarded with information about this?
Well, absolutely. It's like the old recommendation engines from the early days, early algorithms.
Yes.
I think Netflix was one of the first to start doing those recommendations, or it was Amazon. And, I would buy a book for a friend who was interested in menstrual cycles, for example, and it was a gift. It wasn't for me, but the algorithm wasn't sophisticated enough to know that. So thereafter, anything that had to do with menstruation came my way. But just to take it a step back, we, in our keynote, describe bullying as always being a disproportionate abuse of power, whether it's a group who has the disproportionate power or if it's a person. In this case, the corporation has the power.
Sure.
And so we don't have control. We are victims of whatever is fed to us. We think sometimes they'll give the perception that we have a choice.
Yeah, I mean, they'll give an option of do you want to see more or less of these ads, and you go, no, I want to see less, or I want to see none, or don't show this again, but then it pops up somewhere else.
Exactly. And I mean, it's interesting because we're actually at a pivot point at the moment. There's like some significant things that have happened certainly in the last couple of months, but even in the last week, that very much are going to impact how this experience moves forward.
Sure.
So the one is to do with TikTok, because if it's not owned, and this was a Joe Biden initiative, but if it's not owned by an American company by January the 19th, it has to not operate in America anymore.
Okay.
Now, that's a big deal for people who make a living on TikTok, because there are a lot of influencers and people whose daily survival depends on TikTok operating. So there's a chance that, someone steps in quickly, some American, in a nightmare scenario, Elon Musk, so that he then owns X, formerly Twitter, and TikTok. That's one potential nightmare scenario that could happen. Or some other company, some other US company. You could hope that, okay, maybe it's someone who has ethics and decency. But we haven't seen that, because if you take X, formerly Twitter, right, the manipulation that happens on that platform, I mean, it happened before, but now it's so pronounced, it's unashamed. It's like just constant. So just recently, there was this war that broke out between the old MAGA faction and the new tech bro MAGA faction. Right. And sort of this war broke out. And, from my perspective, I just grabbed the popcorn to watch, because I don't care who loses or who wins in that fight. But what happened was, so he was shadow banning, which is a way of your posts not reaching who they're supposed to reach, right, or when they're supposed to reach. And in some cases, actually kicking people off the platform or taking away the verification badges, which mean nothing on X anyway, because verification badges. So in this whole tumult of the internet, right, there's one of the things that Twitter had done, among with other platforms, is that you could verify who you were. So Brian Schimmel, you didn't want someone pretending to be you.
Right.
And claiming to be a music director and to be doing these things in your name.
Right.
And so there was a way that you could be verified. You would get the blue thing.
Correct.
Sure, it was a little bit elitist, and the criteria that made you eligible to be verified was a whole thing. Right. But you could rely that if you saw something from Cher, or if you saw something from Mark Cuban, or anyone,
that it was
that's who it was.
That it was the real person. Yeah.
And then Elon Musk comes along and says, anyone can buy a blue verification mark. So now you even see something. If I see something like on that comes via X, and let's just say it's from Pink, and it has a verification sticker, I'm not convinced that that's Pink. I mean, it could be anyone who's just paid to have.
Who's paid and who's posing as, yeah.
So that's an example of a policy that in a bullying way took away something that we could rely on. In this age of so much misinformation, And we're bullied by misinformation.
And we are also bullied by the oversight of bots. I mean,
Absolutely.
it was about 6 months ago that I torched my entire Facebook account and I deleted it.
That's what I was going to ask you about. I wanted you, and while telling the story, I want you to also say what you felt as you were going through this process. Like what you actually felt that compelled you to do what.
Yeah. I mean, I'd had a Facebook account for like over 20 years. And I've never been one of those scrollers. Because call me self-involved, call me selfish, call me whatever you want to call me. I'm not particularly interested in scrolling to see what other people are doing. I don't really care. I'm one of those people who used Facebook to basically say, if I was traveling and this is where I was, and I was in this place in the world or that place in the world, or if I was working and I was doing a show and I was conducting something and I was doing a project, it was a means of going, this is what I'm doing. I was not one of those people who used it for opinion and for being provocative. And about 6 months ago, there was a colleague of mine who had produced a show, and she asked me if I would write a post about the show. She didn't tell me what to say. She just said that you have people who trust your opinion on these matters, and please, will you write a post? I said, sure. And also the thing is that people in my industry, in the entertainment industry here who know me, know I do not post often about things I see, because I'm not one of those people who writes, oh, it's wonderful, oh, it's fabulous, oh, it's great, oh, it's brilliant about everything I see. I'm just not that guy. But at the same time...
And because you don't think that.
Correct. But I'm not going to be a bastard and say, you know, it's awful, it's horrible, it's mediocre. I just say nothing, which often says everything it needs to say. Because when I rave about something, you can't stop me. So I write this post for my friend, which was actually a post all about her school of students who had put together a show with using the music of Meatloaf or Jim Steinman. And lo and behold, 2 days later, the post has been removed.
By Facebook.
By Facebook. And I was not given an option to contest it or to argue it. I was told, and these were the words, I will never forget them. Your post has been pulled because it, quote, appears as if you are gathering sensitive information on others, end quote.
Jesus, I mean, the irony, Facebook, I mean, who gave Cambridge Analytica access to everything to manipulate an election. But, I mean, that's just, I mean, the irony.
And the further irony is that I don't write political comments or provocative comments. I don't. It's just not who I am. I don't have any issue with people who do, but it's just not who I am. And I was so fucking angry. I was so fucking angry that I just went, fuck this. I will not be bullied by AI bots. And I torched my entire 20 years. Gone.
I mean, and that's, it's such a perfect example because here's the irony. So the bot, which is trained, so the bot, Facebook knows, or Meta, let's just say, name names, they know exactly what the bots are doing. So interestingly, our podcast, which would be beneficial for children to hear, even if
I say fuck.
Even if you say fuck. But the policies of YouTube and, when the podcast gets posted, we have to stipulate that it's not for children because it contains the word fuck. And I sometimes see some stupid, law and crime crap that I watch on YouTube, which I shouldn't, because that's just dopamine hits, being bullied by dopamine. But what happens is I'll see them and they'll ridiculously say, they won't say the word sexual, because God forbid someone hears the word sexual. It's okay to promote the priest that's molesting the child.
Right.
That's cool. But God forbid you use the word sexual or you say the word fuck. So in some ways, people who would benefit really a lot from this, especially when we talk about bullying at school. And sure, it's great for parents to listen to and it's great for adults to reflect on, especially if they have kids. But, or people who are doing it, or if we're dealing with issues in the workplace. But, what 15-year-old hasn't heard the word fuck? And then is deprived of hearing tools on how to manage being bullied that we might address on this podcast.
I think it surprises parents as to just what their kids actually know and what their kids actually are exposed to. In our keynote, we have a video, and we went out to 2 schools, and we got a bunch of our students to share with us some of the language that they either have used or have heard or have encountered in the context of bullying. And when we show the video, especially to adults and to parents, they are so shocked and they're so stunned, how can you show this? And we go, this is the language that your kids are using. And where do you think they hear it? It's all, wherever you go, you can ban their phones and restrict their screen time and do all of that. There's no escaping it. They are bullied all the time, and by some form of medium that is going to get to them, and if not directly on their own phone, it'll be on somebody else's phone.
So now, one of the things, a specific line that you talk about in our keynote is when you say how we're bullied by algorithms,
Yeah.
you also say how
Oh,
or why.
I say why.
Well, you say how. Every day we're bullied by algorithms.
Yes. I say the line I use is, how do we encourage empathy and kindness in our environments, both real and virtual, when every single one of us is bullied every single day by algorithms designed to promote the most toxic content?
And that bingo, because that's the issue. The content is the way that engagement happens for these platforms is by promoting the most toxic content. That is how it works. And so, the algorithm will see, and this is now trained by the algorithm, right? So if you respond to a post by putting a thumbs up, right?
Yeah.
And someone else responds to a post by putting an angry emoji, the more angry emojis, the higher that content will rise. That's how it works.
You see, it gives into the most base of human characteristics, and you've even one of your lines in our keynote, which I think is absolutely true, is technology is not nefarious. Technology is neutral. So the technology itself is neutral. It's the corporate minds behind the technology who are feeding into the darkest and the basest and the most the side of humanity that it goes back to even if you think of centuries ago of public burnings and public hangings, there's something in the human condition that is satiated and sated by seeing things that are dark, and seeing that there's something that satisfies the human condition to witness the profound torture of others. And what the algorithms are doing is that they're feeding into that side of human nature. Because, yes, you'll always have people who go, yeah, but peace and harmony, and let's make the world a better place, and yada 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 yada, which I don't disagree with. But peace and harmony and world in union doesn't sell tickets.
Well,
the world in carnage sells tickets.
Yeah. I think the other thing worth sort of bringing it back to current century, and in fact this week, so...
But
I get the point.
My point is that whether it was then or now, it's all feeding. It's using different means
Yes.
to feed into the same hunger.
Now that's being defended. So let's just jump here for a second.
Oh, yeah.
So this week, Mark Zuckerberg announced that Facebook is henceforth going to, they had, during the election and during the Biden administration, had manipulated the algorithm to downplay political posts. Admitted it. People weren't interested in politics, they said, which is why people sought to engage in politics elsewhere than Facebook. But,
yes, but I was gathering sensitive information.
yeah, yeah. So they decided now that actually a lot of the freedom of speech, there were too many freedom of speech issues. So they are, from a content moderation standpoint, if you decide that you want to call a trans person or a gay person mentally disordered, now it's cool. It wasn't before. Now you can. They don't want to monitor because now everyone's doing that, and so they don't want to squelch that kind of expression. Okay, and then not only that, they also are doing away with fact checkers.
Yeah.
Who needs fact checkers? Rather just trade in misinformation. So what's going to happen now is that Facebook is going to become even more of a cesspool of direct misinformation, hate, etc., kind of how Twitter has become, because he's emulating, even said so, is emulating what Elon Musk did to Twitter. And on Twitter, now it's supposedly a free speech zone, but only if it's free speech that Elon Musk likes. Or, if in the case of China, where he's doing business with China, if they tell him to remove something, he removes. So he claims to be a free speech absolutist. He's anything but. It's the same as these religious institutions who want to discriminate against whether it's gay people or people who have abortions or whoever it might be, under the guise of, by not being able to discriminate, you're infringing on their religious freedom. That's how it's framed. And so this is being done now. So now it's a freedom of speech thing. Suddenly it's freedom of speech that Zuckerberg and Musk and all of them who are donating millions to the inauguration, but that's a whole nother thing. And where the real impetus behind why they're doing this is so blatant. But they're framing it as being free speech. But it'll be interesting because already you're starting to see all these posts of saying 36-year-old pedophile Mark Zuckerberg died on January 9th, and posting this all over Facebook. Because if misinformation's cool, then misinformation's cool, you know? And relying on people to just have to now filter through all this shit, basically. And so if you don't want to be victimized by algorithms and you don't want to have your online experience shaped like that, then we've got to figure out ways of how do you not be bullied in this way, aside from not engaging at all. Like, there might be practical tools that are available that you can use.
Well, I came back to Facebook only 3 months ago because I came back reluctantly because the other thing about how we are bullied in this way is that the world is run on social media, and whether we like it or not, no matter how much we add filters and things we do want to see and don't want to see, businesses run on the power of social media. And it's like, it's honestly, I realized, when we started this and to get this out there. How else are we going to get this out there without social media? So you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't.
Well, I mean, YouTube, an example. I mean, obviously we use YouTube as one of the channels for this podcast, but I did an exhibition. The last exhibition I did, which was based on the torture images. They were reenactments of the torture images from Abu Ghraib in Iraq.
Right.
They were a commentary, so they were very explicit, whereas the military and the media had blurred out genitals and body parts that they deemed inappropriate. It was ironic because the torture itself wasn't inappropriate. So the piling of people on a pyramid or forcing them to simulate, like all of that was okay, but God forbid you saw their penis at the same time. That was more indecent to them than the torture, which was part of what the commentary was. And it was an exhibition, I mean, New York, London, Beijing even, I had that exhibition. I could never promote it on Facebook or YouTube. The very images violate their policy.
Right.
So I could never leverage social media as an artist. Even the stuff from Annoy.com I couldn't use because most of it violates their standards.
And that's therein lies the point. Is it how much we rely on social media to sell products and sell our wares and sell our trade and whatever we're doing, and it's just. I mean, I don't know unless you're living, you know, in a village in some third world country away from technology and away from all things that are what we know. Unless you are willing to disconnect from the world in every possible way, it just seems to me that we can't function without having a social media presence.
So there is that component. I mean, it's, you know, one of the podcasts I watched was a Diary of a CEO. And I forget the person, unfortunately, I forget the name of the person who he was interviewing, a sleep expert, who was saying how one of the founders of Netflix stated that their biggest enemy is sleep. Like for them, when you're not, and it's a function of capitalism, really. Because if you're sleeping, you're not consuming or producing.
Sure.
So, you know, sleep's an enemy to that. And so everything is about us being engaged. It doesn't matter how unhealthy it is to stare into a screen day in and day out. So they have these dopamine hits or appealing to our dark side or whatever it is that's going to intrigue us and have us just keep scrolling and scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. You know, the impact that has on children and their ability to communicate. You know, we used to read books and play outside, and I mean, yeah, sure, we had our problems. This is next level.
I mean, it's a miracle that the kids even know what a book is. You know,
isn't that an thing you read on a Kindle? Like that, literally, they don't know. They don't. You know, and there's one thing I will say, because this kind of comes back when it comes to policies of social media companies, right? all of it to this day is governed by the Communications Decency Act of 1996.
Well, which you had something to do with, am I right?
I did have something. I didn't have something to do with it. I had something to do with overturning one of the provisions.
Right.
So that governs telecommunications to this day, and it was an update of telecommunications law from before in the United States that was 40 years old, and they tried to adapt it to work on the internet, but it was impossible, like just because the technology is so different. But the essence of that was, so there was a provision that you couldn't transmit over the internet. Now listen to how stupid this is, because imagine this. You couldn't transmit over the internet anything indecent with an intent to annoy someone. Have you ever not seen anything indecent with an intent to annoy someone on the internet? I mean, that's all it is.
That's all it is. That's all it is right now.
But that was the law at the time, as it was passed. It was signed by passed by Congress, signed by Bill Clinton into law. And I fought that provision because at the time, my question was, indecent according to who and annoying according to who? Because I could credibly argue, and this was one of the examples, that, something that someone would see, or someone could say that abortion was indecent and annoying. So you couldn't talk about abortion. Or someone could say, I find homosexuality indecent and it annoys me. So then who's deciding what's indecent and what's annoying? I could look at content that was very, very annoying to me, and then the very same content by the very same person, I could smoke a joint and be in a much better mood and not be annoyed by it. So even that wasn't the content, it was the person responding to it.
Correct.
And so with that, I launched a website called annoy.com, as you know, which was designed to challenge it. And that case went all the way to the Supreme Court, based on the fact that the provision was unconstitutionally vague. It was, for those very reasons. And so now, given what I know of what came after that was Facebook and Twitter and all of those things, would I have spent my money and my time being interrogated by the FBI, all of those things that happened to facilitate the transmission of indecent and annoying speech? I don't know so much.
But I mean, looking back is what do they call it?
2020 hindsight.
Yeah, hindsight is 2020 vision. I mean, could you have known in 1996, 97, whenever it was, that that nearly 30 years later, that this is where it was all going to lead to?
Yeah. And back then, I was a free speech absolutist. And I'll tell you why. And to some degree, I think it's important because we're dealing with now, with people that we speak to, whether it's schools or corporations, we're talking about policies. And sometimes there are zero tolerance policies which we don't particularly ascribe to because we believe that there needs to be room for redemption. And we can go into a whole conversation about that another time. But suffice to say that these policies are important. So when you've got a zero tolerance policy where you can't say a word or you can't express a sentiment, I think it's problematic because how do you even teach that it is offensive if you can't say what the offensive thing is that you're trying to teach?
Right.
There's a word that rhymes with rich, but it's got to be. but you can't say bitch. Like, it's so stupid. Like, you know, you need to be able to explore these ideas. At the time, on Hanoi.com, there were white supremacists, there were anti-Semites, there were liberal. I mean, it was across the board, everything. And it was a free-for-all. The only thing you couldn't do on Hanoi.com was sell guns. Otherwise, you could say whatever you wanted. And at the time...
Which was, whether you realize it or not, was such a precursor to what social media has become.
Yeah. But also at the time, like someone said to me, someone published excerpts from Mein Kampf on it. And people were saying to me, as the publisher, how can you allow Mein Kampf on there? I was like, because how are you going to know what Hitler wrote if you can't read it? Like, it doesn't mean I ascribe to it. You have to be able to read it. Also, I want to know if there are people who are using that as a you know, a life guide. I want to know who those people are. I want to know where they're coming from. If people want to kill the gays or, you know, kill black people, we want to know. Express it. Because banning the words doesn't get rid of the sentiment.
No.
It hides it. It just makes it more difficult to spot.
But you've always said as well, which I think a lot of people don't realize, is that you believe, as a free speech absolutist, you don't believe in banning free speech, but you do believe that speech has consequences.
Absolutely. That's the big misnomer. You know, people think that free speech means free from consequence.
No,
it doesn't. And I think that also free speech, the way I saw it then, was I didn't believe that government should be telling you what to say. That doesn't mean I believe that you can just say whatever you like, wherever you like, and that there are absolutely no restrictions whatsoever. There are things like social etiquette. You know, on a social media platform, the owner sets the policy.
Yes.
You know, so you can have a content moderation policy, you can have terms of service. Most of our speech online isn't governed by the government. It's governed by the terms of service of YouTube and Amazon and all of these places.
And I'll tell you who's very much like that is Zoom. Zoom is very much like that. Zoom have terms of service, and because there are people who create all sorts of rooms on Zoom that are iniquitous in all various manner, and you know
it's the most politely described way I've ever heard that put.
And it's happened to me. If you are given a Zoom link and you don't know exactly what the content is, but you think you know what you're going into, the moment you click on the link, Zoom will ban you. And you can appeal it, but as far as they are concerned, just by entering a room that they had deemed inappropriate or against their terms of service, you are a participant whether you have said one word or not.
I didn't even know. I mean, Zoom's never been my go-to for that kind of content.
You've now learned something about Zoom and something about me, and so is everybody else watching this.
But just to make that like one point, so we should ban bullying words, either in a workplace or at a school. How's that really going to help? That's not addressing the issue.
No. And also, I've always said that when you ban anything or you make anything forbidden, it makes it more interesting, it makes it sweeter, it makes it more interesting and more provocative. You know, it's my metaphor I love to use of Eve and the apple. That that she had free reign. If you, however you believe or manifest or look at the story of Adam and Eve, which doesn't have to be a religious context or a biblical context, but the metaphor was that Eve was told you can eat any fruit in the garden except from the tree in the middle that has the apples. And what did she do? She went straight for the tree that had the apples. Why? Because she was told not to.
Exactly. So, I mean, listen, some of the things you can do right now, you can demand, to what end remains to be seen, but you can demand accountability and transparency from the social media platforms that you frequent, or leave them. You know, a lot of people left Twitter, or rather X, to go to Blue Sky. Why? Because Blue Sky allows you to curate an experience that you want. It's not ad-driven.
For now.
I mean, and that's their promise, but remains to be seen. But it's open source, the technology. So it's not like this walled off platform. And you get to, if you don't want to hear Andrew Tate's toxic misogyny, block.
Yeah.
And it's easy, and they don't, on Twitter, you block, but you can still see, and then they can get through, and then it gets promoted and still pushed. Like, every time I logged onto fucking X, I would get Don Trump Jr.'s posts. Like, what demented algorithm would have thought I'd be interested in that?
To wrap up this fairly lengthy podcast, what I find even more alarming, and I'm sure it's happened to you, is it not only, I mean, we had started by saying, you know, how you click on something and then suddenly you are bombarded. How many times has it happened? And recently I've seen that there's been a lawsuit against or payout by Apple because Siri was listening to a whole bunch of people. And how often has it happened that you're not even searching for something, but you just are in a conversation in a room talking to somebody about it, and the next thing, out of nowhere, on your Facebook, on your YouTube, on your somewhere. I mean, it blew my mind a couple of weeks ago. I mean, I haven't spoken about, you know, the groundbreaking 80s television shows, or the shows that way before streaming had reshaped television, and it was Dallas and it was Dynasty and all of those late 70s, early 80s series. And I kid you not, I went on YouTube about half an hour later, and there was suddenly a Dallas clip and a Dynasty clip, and it's like...
Or Dynasty, as they say in the States.
I was like, what?
I mean, listen, as we wrap here, I think it's important to know that these algorithms are silent bullies. And hopefully this helps to shine a bit of a light onto it, because there are things you can do about it. You can log off. Fucking go outside. Just don't be tricked by the dopamine hits that they're feeding you. That you have to. Just you can. It's hard, but you have to work against it.
And by the way, I'm still not a scroller.
So anyway, thanks for listening. Please remember to subscribe or like, or to send this to people who you think would be interested. And we'd like to hear, from you. If there are things that you can relate to in this story, or how you feel bullied by technology.
Definitely.
Thanks for tuning in. Cheers.